Hi, I'm Jeff Zeig, and here I am in the training room at the Milton Erickson Foundation in Phoenix, Arizona, with another 5-minute tip for therapists. This particular tip is about the use of metaphor. Metaphor is a very powerful tool, and it's underused by therapists. Certainly, poets have been using metaphors, writers use metaphors, but therapists may not be adequately equipped or adequately trained to be able to use metaphor. Now, this is a process of signification, and signification is the representation or conveying of meaning. Milton Erickson was very famous for being indirect, but that's really a very limiting way to think about Erickson. Erickson was orienting toward, because in a Socratic way, he wanted the person to get, by virtue of the dint of their own effort, to get a concept. So signification, orienting towards, is a much better way of thinking. Now, one of the ways that we can orient towards is by using language that is figurative. And whenever you describe something by comparing it to something else, you're using figurative language. A case of that is using metaphor. Metaphor is a figure of speech in which a word or phrase is applied to an object that is not literally applicable. Now, metaphor does not have to be only something that we do with words. And if we only think about metaphor as words, we're limiting ourselves. Now, let's just go back to a very simple metaphor. In Romeo and Juliet, Shakespeare has Romeo say, "Juliet is the sun." Now, that's a metaphor. And somehow Shakespeare was in the state of being orienting towards, or the state of signifying, being figurative in his use of language. If you asked 100 people, what does Juliet as the sun mean? You would have a wide variety of responses, but we would all get the realization, the conceptual realization, that to Romeo, she is the center of his world. And the metaphor conveys that. Now, we don't only need to use verbal metaphors. We can use spatial metaphors. We can use tonal metaphors. We can use gestural metaphors. We can use postural metaphors. We can use living metaphors. We could do sculpting, therapist sculpting as a metaphor. Metaphor is the way of conveying a representation. And so if you say to somebody, "You're a lion," that's a metaphor. Now, you could use a simpler form, a simile. "You're like a lion." Shakespeare could have said Juliet is like the sun, but the metaphor was much more powerful. Now, when you can begin to grasp the idea that metaphor is something that you can use, something that you can apply, something that can make your therapy more successful when you want to convey a concept. If you just want to convey a fact, just explain the fact. But when you want somebody to grasp, to get it, to realize something, then you're going to, you may be more successful by using a metaphor. What I tell my students is when you're doing a hypnotic induction, then when you come to a concept that you want the client to realize, let's say the idea that you want, the concept that you want the person to realize is comfort. As soon as you find a concept, then one of the things that you can practice is to create a simile. So just find you're saying comfort, just like, and use the simile to begin to strengthen your command of metaphor. Whatever it is that comes to your mind, more eloquent, more elegant, use the simile as a way of broaching into the world of using metaphor. Then feel yourself slipping into the state of being metaphoric. So you can take a deep breath, feel comfort, just like you're in a lake as a child and you're floating and it's effortless and the water is warm and you can feel yourself buoyant and suspended. And then the simile is a way of embellishing the concept that you want the person to realize. Now, in the next of these series, I'm going to show you an example of the great family therapist Salvador Minuchin. And in this particular example of psychotherapy, of family therapy, that Minuchin did a few decades ago, you will see Minuchin open the session with a verbal metaphor. And then you'll see Minuchin use a spatial metaphor. And you're going to be able to see the effectiveness that the use of metaphor has. And then there'll be an additional section. The third of this series on metaphor, I'm going to talk with you more about how you might apply metaphor in different stages of therapy. So this is Jeff Zeig with another 5-minute video for therapists from Phoenix, Arizona. Thank you very much.